Welcome to a conversation with a community leader sponsored by Leadership Kitsap. I'm Cary Bozeman and I'm your host, and I'm the former mayor of the city of Bremerton, and I'm currently a Port of Bremerton commissioner, so I know my guests pretty well. And my guest today is Warren Hendrickson, who is the director of the Bremerton National Airport. Is that title correct, Warren?
It certainly is, yes.
Okay, well, congratulations on that. Warren, before we get going talking about the Bremerton National Airport, which I know a lot of people are curious about, what's your background? What brought you to Kitsap County and to the Bremerton National Airport?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Cary, and to speak with your audience today. I have had a dream career, a lifelong profession in aviation, starting from the time I was a 10-year-old kid and watching airplanes come and go in Long Island, New York, or what was then Idlewild, now John F. Kennedy Airport. And I was a military pilot. I was a commercial pilot that spanned 2.5 decades in each of those two career fields overlapping. And then after that, I got involved with a new profession on the airport side of things, working for local airports in Pierce County initially, and then expanded my horizon to the entire state and then the region. And eventually it was a chance to come home and be part of this operation here at Bremerton National Airport. I joined the airport and the port about 2.5 years ago. And this has always been my dream final stop in a long and privileged career that I've been able to have.
Yeah, I feel the same way about being a port commissioner. Kind of after 50 years being in public service, it was a good place to land.
Yes.
Warren, how long were you a commercial pilot? Who'd you fly for?
30 years. I was just shy of 25 years with Delta Airlines. And then I was involved with a group of former Delta pilots, and we literally started a brand new cargo airline from scratch. It was called Cargo 360. Of 96 applicants that year, there were only two airlines that received FAA certification, and we were one of those two. And we flew 747s under contract to Korean Airlines for about 4 years. And at that point, the company was sold to a larger consortium, and that stage of my career passed away.
So you've flown all over the world, right?
I have, yes.
What's your favorite city?
Oh, that's always a tough one. Domestically, San Diego, and flying into Seattle, quite honestly, is a treat, just because coming into Puget Sound with the mountains and the water and the evergreens is just absolutely a thrill. But overseas, I would have to say one of my favorites was probably going into Vienna.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful experience, quite a life. Warren, Bremerton is called a general aviation airport. What is a general aviation airport?
You know, it's a term that many people don't fully comprehend or fully understand, and it runs the gamut. Basically, it means everything except military service and commercial passenger and commercial cargo service. So everything beyond that works in terms of flight training, business executive jet travel, medical airlift, law enforcement support operations, recreational flying. And it covers the gamut from A to Z along those lines. So essentially anything other than commercial passenger, commercial cargo service, and military is what we cater to here.
And why is it called Bremerton National Airport? Does the national have any real significance, or did we just name it that?
You know, there's two questions I have been absolutely unable to answer. And if anybody in the audience knows the answer, I would love to know. Originally, this was Fleet Field back in 1936 when it was built on Bays Bog, eventually became Kitsap County Airport. And then the county handed it to the port back in 1983, I believe it was. And at some point thereafter, it was renamed Bremerton National Airport. And I don't know exactly what the motive was behind that name. We actually serve as a regional airport in terms of the FAA classification. So the national has no real meaning other than somebody somewhere picked that name. There's also a special 3-letter identifier that goes along with the airport. It's that for FAA purposes, it's PWT. And again, I have not been able to find a direct connection as to how those numbers came about for this airport. So I would love to know.
So the history is bunch of people way back. What was it? When did it start? 1930s or something?
Not 1936. There were a group of flyers that were traveling across Puget Sound by boat to go fly. And they said, we need an airport on this side of the sound. And they literally found this peat bog here along Highway 3 and approached the local owner. And he said, yeah, I'd be happy to have you guys put an airstrip on my land. And that's how it started.
Well, so just a private venture back
Yes.
in those days, huh?
Yes, it was.
I've seen some pictures of all that. So, are there a lot of general aviation airports? And if there are, how many? How do we rank in size as a general aviation airport in this state?
In this state, so there are 134 public use facilities in public use airports in Washington State, 10 of which offer commercial passenger service. That's your Seattle's, your Spokane's, your Yakima's. And then the rest of the airports, general aviation. Among those others, that non-commercial airports, of the 124 remaining, we're probably among the top, we're certainly within the top 10 of airports in terms of the number of operations and the facilities that we offer here at this airport.
Most of the other general aviation have I think our runway is 6,000 feet, right?
Yes, it is.
Are most
Yes,
of them shorter than that? Is that a lengthy runway for a general aviation airport?
Actually, it is. You know, typical general aviation airports will be anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 feet long. The fact that we have 6,000 feet means we can accommodate business jets and other aircraft that would not be able to consider going elsewhere. So that's a feather in our cap for having that kind of runway. In addition, the runway navigational aids that we have available allow us to operate 24/7 in all weather conditions.
How big a plane can actually land and take off at our airport? In a 737?
A 737 operates routinely here. We see approximately one every 2 to 3 months. So we get a half a dozen operations a year. The ones that do come in are military. They're either primarily U.S. Navy serving the local shipyard and Navy base Kitsap. In terms of runway capacity, though, we could actually land one of those military C-17s from JBLM here on the runway. Our runway is strong enough and heavy enough to be able to support that. The taxiways are not. So although the aircraft could land and take off from our runway, if it was loading or unloading, it would have to remain on the runway and shut down the airport, since we are only a single runway airport for the period of time they were here. But we could accept an aircraft like that in the event of support of a natural disaster or something along those lines. We could accept an aircraft of that size.
I remember a few years ago, I think I was mayor then, and I got invited out to the airport to watch. John McCain had flown in. He was running for president. You remember this story?
Yeah, I not personally, but I have heard the story. Yes, sir.
Well, apparently it was so foggy you couldn't see the runway. We were up in the kind of little tower office, and apparently he got stuck down at one end of the runway in some mud. But they fired it up. All we could do was see it, and we were all sitting there praying that airplane would get off the ground, and it did. But it was a little touch and go there for a minute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was the John McCain story. So we've got a 6,000-foot runway, Warren. How would you describe the rest of the facilities at the airport? What do we have out there?
We've got we have 7 corporate jet hangars right now to support large business jet aircraft. 7, and we have 4 more that will be going under construction within this next year. So we're essentially increasing our corporate jet capacity by 50% in terms of hangar size. We currently have 162 general aviation hangars, generally for single and twin engine type aircraft. And we are in the process later this fall of beginning about a 6-month process of designing to add additional T hangars at the south end of the airport. And that's all the area that you see over my head behind me on the image. To the left of the runway, as you look at the image, you can see that blank open space. We have more developable land here than any airport between the 2 Vancouvers, Vancouver, BC, and Vancouver, Washington, in terms of additional potential and capability. And that's the entire east side of the runway that you see on the left side of the screen.
So we have 162 hangars for people with their own planes, and then we're building more. So there must be a need for Yeah, so does that mean we're getting more people buying airplanes and flying them now?
You know, it's interesting. That is indeed the case. I think as a result of the change in the environment, people are looking at how did they spend their recreational dollar in an area that's environmentally safe and health-wise. And so by traveling with your family in an airplane or a boat, we're seeing increases in boat sales, and our marina demand has picked up. You can look at the statistics on recreational vehicle sales for families, and that's picked up. Airplane sales have been picked up. And as a result, if I could build 50 hangars tomorrow, I could probably have them filled by next Saturday. The demand
Wow.
throughout Puget Sound is that high.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I wonder most of these planes. I know there's a big vary, but if some person wants to get in and fly his own little airplane, what are they paying for those planes? How
Well,
expensive a sport is this?
it's like any recreational dollar in terms of do you spend your money on a boat or on your lift tickets at the local ski lift, and or how you do it. Basically, aviation is affordable. It is affordable, and our tenants are probably Exhibit A for that. None of them are particularly rich or carry great dollars. There is always the thought that flying is simply for the rich and the famous, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about those that have a passion for being airborne, and you can do it for a fairly low level of investment. Essentially, the purchase of a new car could purchase you an airplane, and with your certification and low operating costs, it can be affordable.
Do we have a lot of people getting trained to be pilots out at our airport? Is there a training option out there?
There is. Our primary, what we call a fixed base operator, which is a term for a company that provides services to the airport. And the services can run the gamut from maintenance to training and to overhaul to avionics equipment or parts supplies. We have such a company here on the airport. It is called Aviation Flight Center. They provide maintenance to piston engine aircraft, and they also have a flight training arm. They have 6 aircraft involved, and they parked right outside my office, and they are going from 7 days a week from first light until sunset. So they are actively involved in training. So I don't have statistics on how many students per year they graduate, but it is a fairly high level of activity. And we're in an excellent airport location for airspace wise to accommodate training. Relatively low population density area where people can go fly to do their aerial maneuvers without negatively impacting the local population, and then coming back in here and getting multiple landing practices.
And some of our retired pilots out there are providing training for high school kids or high school people, aren't they? Isn't there pilot training going on that we provide scholarships to?
That's correct. One of the investments that the port has made for many years now, and that the Port Commission just approved again this past week, is we have an organization on the airport. It's all volunteers. It is the Bremerton Pilots Association. It's made up of over 100 pilots and tenants that fly into or are based here at the airport. And they have a scholarship foundation that they have created within what we call the BPA. And they provide at last count, I believe last year, they produced 11 flight training scholarships, $3,500 each to 11 individuals, men and women, that had achieved their private pilot certification and are reimbursed for the expenses they incurred to get their license.
Yeah, that's a
Fabulous.
great program. The commission, I know we just the other night, we adopted our budget. We have money in the budget for those scholarships. And I know those kids, young people have come up before us, and it's just inspiring to see that they've accomplished that. It's just great. I think it's great. We're next door to one of the biggest military establishments in the world, Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. How much does the military use our airfield?
We don't see it too much in terms of parts or maintenance supplies. What we do see is a tremendous amount of VIP travel. You can imagine the number of personnel and staff and Defense Department people that need to come out and inspect and maintain relationships with the local military command structure. And so we see a fair number of business jets that are supportive. They're not generally identified and painted in the traditional military colors that you would see, like a JBLM. They're executive jets, traveling personnel, or ferrying Navy Kitsap personnel from here to other training locations. We recently had a group that traveled from here to San Diego for a month of training down at Navy Coronado. And so we see quite a bit of activity but it's primarily on the personnel side as opposed to equipment and supplies.
You know, speaking of that, we're an airport for this emergency medical response organization. I can't remember the name of it, but we're flying people. They're flying. Remind me of the name of the group that's doing that, Warren.
So it's called Disaster Airlift Response Team, or DART. And we work closely with, and I'm involved with that. I am an active general aviation pilot and aircraft owner myself. And so I'm a member of this group. And we work closely with Kitsap County Department of Emergency Management. And the intention is to be able to prepare ourselves and practice and do exercises so that in the event of a future Cascadia subduction zone event, i.e. that major 9.0 earthquake, which is teed up and could probably happen at any point in time, if we lose our roads and bridges, how do you resupply those communities? California proved that in the late 70s with the major earthquake in Northern California, and the only avenue into and out of the town was via, it was Loma Prieta, was via air. And they kept that entire community on its feet by air resupply. And so the point of DART is to do that, is to take small aircraft that have the capability of flying into small and distant airfields and bring those supplies as much as their weight capacity can handle to that community that might have no other means of outside support.
And I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, they had a day training or training experience at the airport, didn't they?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We had the local ham radios got involved. The community emergency response team under Kitsap County became involved. We had probably about 140 volunteers altogether. And what we did is we had a food drive where then food was brought out, broken down into groups based upon need. And then we had approximately 20 aircraft that, as a test case, flew it all up to Jefferson County International Airport, just outside of Port Townsend, and 100% of the supplies went to the local food bank. Yeah. And so it was a great support for the local food bank. And the intention was to repeat that exercise last year. And this time, the Bremerton food banks would be the beneficiary. However, the COVID environment resulted in the cancellation of that. We've had tabled the exercises until we have a better understanding of the health environment and the restrictions that might be in place. But we'll get a chance to be repaid for, the part that we played 2 years ago.
That was pretty exciting. Warren, we're making a lot of improvements out at the airport. You might talk a little bit about that and how they're funded. I know a good portion of your funding for capital improvements comes from the FAA. Can you talk a little bit about the improvements we've been making and how that got funded?
Certainly. Yeah, it has been. I've been here at the port now for 2.5 years, and it has been one project right after another, and many times overlapping. It's been thrilling and engaging, to say the least. The types of projects we have, and to help the audience understand how funding works, is essentially you have airside projects, which are your runways, your taxiways, your lighting, your navigational aid, and then you have your landside projects, which are hangars and buildings and infrastructure. The federal government and WWII Aviation on the state level both support airside projects. So if you have an airside project, generally it will be eligible for federal and state funding. The landside projects generally are not. So on the land side, just in the last 2 years, we've created a brand new maintenance equipment storage facility. We have created the infrastructure and the pads for additional corporate hangars. Those were funded 100% by the port. The two of them combined approximately $3.8 million. On the air side, most recently, we swapped out every incandescent light bulb on the airport for LED fixtures. So the energy savings and the inventory reduction by long-term replacements will save the port significant dollars ahead. That was a $2.4 million project that we completed this past December. And so the FAA funded 90% of that. The state kicked in another 5%. So essentially, we got that entire improvement for 5 cents on the dollar from the port's budget.
Yeah. Uh, Basically, very little local tax money going into those projects.
Yes, yes, we leverage federal and state money to the absolute maximum extent that we can.
Yeah, that's great. We don't have a tower at the airport. Why is that? Do we need one eventually at some point?
You know, it's interesting. I get that question. I receive that question often from many participants, and they're wondering what it might take. Would we ever see one? Right now, our traffic count is low in terms of meeting the criteria to actually have a bricks and mortar control tower. It typically takes what they call 100,000 operations a year, and an operation is a takeoff or a landing. So 100,000 takeoffs and landings a year generally gets you in the mix for a discussion of, okay, is it time for a tower for safety reasons, for separation of traffic? We are at approximately the 65 to 70,000 operations level, so don't quite qualify for it. And as a result, on our traffic mix here is all based upon pilots adhering to defined procedures for operating without a control tower and self-announcing their position in a very rigid format so that everybody is aware where everybody else is. And I have to compliment the Bremerton pilot community because I have a radio in my office that I listen to the traffic on a regular basis. And the professionalism of their radio calls, their sequencing, their cooperation on the air is tremendous. And so we've been very successful without a tower. It's possible that as our traffic increases, that we might be in the mix for one down the road.
Yeah. So, Warren, here's a hard question. The famous airport diner has been torn down with their fish and chips that used to attract people flying into our airport. So I know we're replacing that project. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yes, it's one of my favorite things to see happen at this airport. The airport diner has been a fixture here since 1942. And this is one of those landside projects that I talked about that is funded 100% by the port. And because it's not only to serve the local industrial park tenants and our pilot tenants and flying community, but also the local community. So it truly will be a community asset. We are in the initial infrastructure stages. We've completed the demolition. We're now in the process. We're about to go forward with utility and underground utility installation. And then the next step will be the actual building fabrication arrives in January and the walls start going up. And our intention is to be open, I would estimate, somewhere between the 4th of July and Labor Day weekend of next year.
And will they serve fish and chips, Warren?
That's unknown. We have 4 restaurateurs right now that are competing for the right to operate the facility. And it is a question that I receive, quite honestly, Cary, on a weekly basis. Will the fish and chips be coming back?
I do too, Warren. Hey, I was just curious. There's all these private jet organizations where you can rent a private jet for a short period of time. Do any of those operate or fly into our airport?
Yes, they do. NetJets is one of the probably more well-known ones. They operate here routinely. Periodically, I will get a call from the flight operations department, especially if we're under construction and we have, during the lighting project, for example, we had taxiways closed from time to time. So I would talk to their flight operations staff to coordinate their arrivals and departures and the facilities on the airport. But all of them operate here routinely. Oftentimes, they don't require permission. We are an open public use facility. Airport crews and aircraft and business operators can come and go as they please without actually making a phone call to my desk or seeking permission. That's the beauty of a public use airport.
Yeah, well, that's why the FAA funds a lot of our projects.
Yes.
Warren, there's a new development that we're putting in on the south side of the airfield. Can you explain a little bit what you see as the purpose of these spaces that we're developing for industrial kind of uses that might relate to the airport?
Well, yes, over across Highway 3, we're fortunate here at this airport because many airports don't have the space or the room or the capacity to have an industrial park adjacent to the facilities. It's a perfect, very compatible use to have an airport. We've got 65 tenants. 2,500 jobs that we've created, billions of local economic impact
Are
dollars.
a lot of those, are some of those businesses actually using the airport to fly in and fly out things?
Actually, quite honestly, no, they are not. Many of them are here to support the local community, and especially Navy Kitsap and the shipyard.
The business of flying your own airplane is on the increase. And I know, like boating, has COVID-19 had any impact on that, you think?
It certainly has. Absolutely. Because especially now, travel restrictions have become a little tighter. Not only have the commercial airlines reduced their overall capacity because fewer tourist dollars are coming into it, there's still a need for business, but the requirements for both security and health protections have become more restrictive, and as a result, it takes more time, and time is money in the business world, and so we're seeing that there is a greater affinity toward the use of private aircraft. They don't necessarily have to be jets either. There's a tremendous amount of business that's covered with just single engine piston. You know, you can cover all of Washington State and Oregon and the Puget Sound region without having to buy a jet and still save time and perform your work more efficiently.
Yeah. I know last year we got caught up in a big snowstorm. Do we have equipment to keep the runway open and snow comes around?
That's the one real challenge that we do have with our maintenance staff and the size of the airport we have. We're only authorized by the FAA to have a single snow removal truck, and we have it, and we have the biggest plow and the biggest truck that we can use, but it's one truck, and we have 9,000 square feet of runway, not including the taxiways, that we need to keep clear when it snows. And when we received 13 inches of snow in less than a 24-hour period, it was extremely difficult to keep up with that. And we wound up having to close the airport for a short period of time.
Yeah. One of my favorite things at the airport is the World War II planes that fly in every few years. Are we going to see those back again anytime soon?
We have made it real clear to that segment of the industry that our welcome mat is open for any and all visitors that want to come and visit the community. We are fortunate that we have two separate tenants on the field right now that have biplanes and warbirds. The one tenant is a corporate operator, a local businessman. Just this past month, he supported a formation training clinic for warbirds, so that those that are privileged enough to own an aircraft like that can then come and learn how to fly formation with other aircraft of a similar ilk. Our other tenant offers a sightseeing service and flight training in his biplanes and mid-20th century aircraft that are a dream to see. And if everything works out as we hope it does, what you mentioned before about the airport diner coming next summer, we will have a brand new ramp, new pavement, and a tenant with those biplanes and warbirds right outside the diner windows. And that will be a sight.
People can come and rent a ride on one of those biplanes, right?
They certainly can. They certainly can.
My wife keeps saying she wants to do that, but I'm not going with her, Warren. I'll tell you that. Listen, Warren, we're about run out of time. I knew I had more questions than I had time. Is there anything I haven't asked you about the airport you'd like to add real quickly?
Just that we're happy to be part of the community, that we have a significant impact on the entire Kitsap County region. We're the largest airport in the entire Olympic Peninsula. So if there is an opportunity that we can serve the public in any way, whether it be medical, law enforcement, training, business, through our industrial park or our airfield facilities, we would welcome that opportunity. I would love to have those conversations.
Warren, we're all proud of our airport, and we thank that you're giving it such good leadership. I appreciate that. It's important to our community. And I've enjoyed our conversation with Warren, our director of the airport, the Bremerton National Airport. It's been my pleasure, and we'll see you next time on a conversation with another community leader.